Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Rules Committee meeting. It's Monday, December 3rd. It is roughly 6:08, and we're going to begin the meeting. We do have a quorum. First item on our agenda is citizen comment. We've got 3 pages of folks signed up to speak. I believe at least 2 pages of people signed up to speak, so everyone will get 1 minute. I'll call your names, and is there anyone coming in who wanted to sign up to speak? Okay, anyone? Okay, we're gonna close the sign up then for citizen comment. So everyone will get 1 minute to speak. I will call the first 4 names. If you'd please come and line up so that we can move ahead with this. We have Human Services Committee beginning at 7:30 tonight. We would like to try to get to that meeting on time. So if you could come and line up after I call your names, that would be really helpful so we can move along, and we'll be timing you for 1 minute. First person, Juned Ridsky, James Gendon, Tricia Connolly, and Allie Harnett. One minute.
Junad Risky. I was thinking back over time. I've been involved in issues here for a long time. I was involved in an issue with a school board almost 25 years ago. For over a year, I had to deal with them fixing their buildings. I was one of the only people in town that actually was involved with that. And after about a year, I got frustrated enough, and I'm not going to go into all the details, but I called the state, spent about an hour on the phone with the state. After that, 2 weeks later, the district decided to spend $25 million to fix the buildings. Other people here, such as Claire Kelly, were involved with the hospital incinerator. She had to go outside of Evanston to get what she needed. So I guess my thought to this council are reasons. We have the options to go outside the community to get issues resolved. If we can't get them resolved here in the meetings with the people that sit here, we have an option to go somewhere else. And that's maybe what we may need to do with a lot of things here. And there's a lot of things to investigate and look into, and we will be looking. Thank you.
Why is it only 1 minute? I'm just
I'm sorry, we've got 2 pages of people signed up to speak as well. James Gendon, Tricia Connolly, and Allie Harnett, please.
Okay. All right. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you call me.
That's okay.
I am very concerned that the city is resisting a Freedom of Information request which would reveal the amounts paid by each contributor towards paying the costs of the demolition of the Harley Clark Mansion. I recognize that there are conflicting views on the feasibility of preservation, and I'm not arguing about the merits. However, any vote relating to the demolition by this council will be tainted and clouded unless Evanstonians are allowed to learn who is really financing this effort, and until we are able to have a clearer insight into their motives and their methods. We know from other fire production that certain very wealthy and influential supporters of demolition have resorted to highly questionable tactics to pressure members of this council. We know that some wealthy supporters have made what one local editor has called veiled threats to undercut the fundraising efforts for the Crown Center and the Foster School unless the council goes forward with the demolition.
Mr. Gendon.
We know that the same wealthy supporters have attempted to play Evanston neighborhood against Evanston neighborhood
Mr. Gendon,
in their effort
you need to
support the demolition.
Thank you very much.
Can I finish my...
No, I'm sorry, you're way over your time.
Okay, I just hope, since we had a resorting to racial card, we've resorting to people who may, in fact...
Mr. Gendon, you really need to stop.
Have their personal motives. We need
Ms.
to
Connolly.
know who's behind it, and any vote will be taken.
Thank you.
Unless
Ms. Connolly, would you come up
release.
to the podium, please?
Tonight before you, you are going to be thinking about the seriousness of allegations against a alderperson. This has been something over the course of months that has gone on. I hope that we can see a rules committee that can seriously take this on and seriously send a message of what is not acceptable to the community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Allie Harned, then Jen Shader, Peter Keenan, and Jeremy Pardo. Please come up.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Rules Committee. I'm Allie Harned, resident of the 2nd Ward and representative of Save Harley Clark, an organization that consists of hundreds of volunteers as well as 27,476 voters. I don't think I need to tell you to have integrity about the discussion you'll have tonight because you all have it. Tonight is just a matter of applying it. We appreciate your service, and we all very much appreciate the citizens who are appointed by the mayor to serve on the Board of Ethics. I just wanted to give you some quotes to help guide you in what you'll be discussing tonight. First, the part of the ethics violation that I feel is most egregious in my mind was soliciting donations from an 8th Ward resident because, to quote Alderman Rainey, they want to be able to say they have the financial support from all the wards. Currently short 8th and 3rd Ward, so I'm out beating the bushes for a few small contributions. Can your family help with a small donation? Soliciting donations itself is not the worst thing in the world. I know many people in this room solicit as well as give donations for many great causes. The part that ties this together with the abuse of power is on the Evanston Lighthouse Dunes website, and in comments from the representatives that we have heard here, they say, we are a group of volunteers representing all wards. This links the donation solicitation email to the outcome because how many of you would have voted for demolition?
Thank you. Your time's up.
Great.
Ms. Shader, Peter Keenan, and Jeremy Pardo, please come up.
I sent each of you an email earlier today. I'm hoping that you read it. I just want to read a paragraph from it. I feel very strongly that you all work hard to appoint people to boards, commissions, and committees for a purpose. I also feel very strongly that you all work very hard to do your jobs. You may agree or disagree with the Board of Ethics findings and decisions, but that is not your job tonight. Your job tonight is not to relitigate the charges against Alderman Rainey. If it were, you'd have to start by relitigating jurisdiction on the matters they did not hear, but simply only to decide what sanctions or penalties should be applied based on their findings. Please allow the Board of Ethics to do their job. Should you dismiss, alter, or override their findings and decide that you are the sole authoritative body in Evanston City government, you'll be sending a strong message to Evanstonians that there's a fox guarding the henhouse situation in our city. I end with true gratitude and faith. Gratitude for the work you do, for the time you put in, for the time you have taken to read this, and for faith that you will do the right thing tonight. Please also take a look at what Allie has just handed out to you. There are additional municipal codes that you should be looking at, not just the memo that was put forth to you by the Corporation Council and City Manager. Thank you.
With the time limitation I had, I'm just going to read a couple of paragraphs from a letter sent to you by Parikh Law Group, who is the lawyers representing Ms. Lori Keenan and Ms. Claire Kelly and their ethics complaints against Alderman Rainey. Contrary to the Evanston Code, it is my understanding that the city manager and legal department in their report for the upcoming vote are advising nothing more than a mere censuring of Alderman Rainey be the only penalty imposed pursuant to the ethical violations. This would not only be contrary to the Board of Ethics recommendations, but it would also be in violation of the Evanston City Code. It appears that the city manager and legal department do not have a clear understanding of the Evanston City Code and are either misunderstanding, misleading, or misrepresenting the remedies available. In direct conflict with the advice rendered by the city manager and legal department, the Evanston City Code makes it clear that censuring Alderman Rainey is not, capitalized not, the only option available to the Rules Committee. The advice of the city manager and legal department is incorrect and contrary to the Evanston Code of Ethics. I'll skip to the next paragraph. Citing special violations. In fact, the Evanston City Code of Ethics clearly allows for the penalty to be imposed. Specifically, Section 1-10-9 of the Evanston Code of Ethics pertains to the sanctions. Quote, in addition to any other penalty that may be applicable, whether, I'll just read the code and I'll be done. Whether criminal or civil.
We received your email. We appreciate it. Your time is up. I need to be fair to everyone.
An officer or employee who intentionally violates any provision of this chapter may be subject to censure, suspension, removal from office or employment, or other disciplinary action as determined by the appropriate city authority. Thank you. Sorry for the overtime.
Hi, Chairman Fisk, members of the committee. My name is John Moore. I just want to echo what others have said, especially Jen Shader, about why the Rules Committee should vote for recusal. The Board of Ethics found that Alderman Rainey gave the appearance of a conflict of interest and showed impartiality. The only way to implement meaningfully the board's recommendation here is for the Rules Committee to support her recusal. Otherwise, her continued participation in the Harley-Clark votes will taint the deliberative process, violate due process, and undermine the confidence in the integrity of the decision-making of the City Council. As Jen said pretty clearly, the code plainly accounts or allows recusal since it speaks to other disciplinary action that may be taken. Censure will not do it because it's very clear that Alderman Rainey has prejudged the Harley-Clark issue. For that reason, recusal is imperative. Failure to do so also is going to call into question any City Council action related to the vote. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Jill Zordon. And then Art Newman, did you want to speak at citizen comment? Or? Will I get another opportunity? Yes. Okay. And Carl Klein, please. Is Jill Zordon here? Jill, you're going to pass? Okay, sure.
Good evening.
No.
Sorry. What's that?
Go ahead.
Okay, I can start. Ahead. All right, thank you. Good evening. I'm going to speak about the appeal to the Preservation Commission's unanimous decision to deny demolition of the Harley-Clark Mansion, and I would hope that you would all agree that you should send that appeal actually to the Planning and Development Committee because it's consisted of 7 aldermen, and if, according to the code, it says that it should be sent to a committee that consists of all aldermen. What is the definition of all? I mean, seven is all aldermen. We don't have a private citizen on that committee, so I would therefore please urge you to send it to the Planning and Development Committee before sending it to full council. You did this. You sent the Edgemere Court application directly to the full City Council, and I would hope, and there was several aldermen that voiced opinions that you should follow the rules and first send it to Planning and Development and then to full council. So I would hope that you would learn from that lesson and send it to Planning and Development because it does consist of all aldermen. Thank you.
That's perfect. We appreciate that. Chris Kruger, Sean Jones, Nancy Shreenan. Mr. Jones, did you want to? Where are you? There, I'm sorry.
Not a citizen comment.
Okay. So we have Chris Kruger, Nancy Shreenan, Mary Rosinski, and Cordelia Maloney. If you all could come up and anybody here? Okay. All right. Chris Kruger is not here. Is that correct? Okay. Nancy Shreenan.
So, as the Ethics Board recommended, Alderman Rainey needs to be prohibited from any more votes on Harley-Clark. We got to this point because I believed I was doing my civic duty by voicing an opinion about Harley-Clark in June. Rainey's response to my letter was to call it mean and accuse me of not appreciating benefactors, and to forward it to the wealthiest donors to demolition with contemptuous remarks to those donors. I expect more of my elected officials, and I too don't want to learn that the fox is guarding the henhouse or that money is not only corrupting Evanston politics in the same way it is corrupting national politics. And that's really all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mary Rosinski? Then we have Cordelia Maloney, Lori Keenan, Claire Kelly, and Nick Agnew.
Most people have already said the way I feel about this. The one thing I'm going to cede my time to Lori Keenan. I just want to say I hope you would respect the time and effort of your boards who are working on your commissions and follow their recommendations.
Okay, we have Lori Keenan next.
I think Cordelia Maloney.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, and actually, I'm just going to cede my time to Lori.
Okay, so what do we have here?
As one of the complainants, I'm here tonight to ask you to uphold the findings and remedies of the Ethics Board, which recommended that Alderman Rainey either be recused or prohibited from discussing or voting on Harley Clark, as has been recommended by the Ethics Board. It's not true that council's only remedy with respect to Alderman Rainey's violations is censure. Section 1-10-9D of the city's code sets forth options in addition to censure, specifically, quote, suspension and removal from office and other disciplinary action as determined by the appropriate city authority. The Ethics Board is probably the most fair and impartial board in the community. They don't always find against the defendant, and rarely so severely. To quote Ethics Board member Karina Bierman, the mocking of a constituent, the use of a city email for fundraising, the use of city email to advocate, the use of profanity and aggressive language, the releasing of information otherwise requiring a FOIA request, the actively and disruptively avoiding alternate viewpoints while in a voting position and maintaining a voting position in light of the above described activities all combined give the appearance of a conflict of interest and lack of impartiality that we expect from the City of Evanston Code of Ethics relating to pending legislative issues, and find that Alderman Rainey has violated the code's requirement of impartiality. I'd like to say the mayor emailed me after 5 weeks of not hearing from him, and I emailed him again, and he said the reality is we have a long established process within the city to handle threats, disputes, conflicts, and ethics. By filing an ethics complaint, you will avail yourself to that process. Similarly, if you file a police complaint, you will avail yourself to that process, Haggerty said. If an hourly employee at a retail or food establishment in town had spoken to a customer in the same way that Alderman Rainey spoke to me, threatening me, don't mess with me, and saying fuck you in a public meeting, they would lose their job. As public servants, I would hope that we hold our elected officials to a much higher standard than that. We've often heard that the citizens maligned and characterized as vitriolic, but it's not me who has sworn and threatened an alderman. I'm here tonight asking for justice in the name of democracy, that you uphold the findings of the Ethics Board with regard to Alderman Rainey, that she recuse herself or be prohibited from voting or discussing Harley Clark. Thank you.
Claire Kelly and Nick Abney, please. Okay.
I believe I was absent when you called my name.
I will. Yes, you were.
Christopher Kruger, Dodge Avenue. I do support the findings of the Ethics Board. It seems that if there's no efficacy to the decision of the Ethics Board, I wonder why we have it. And so I have no reason to suspect their findings. I address this to all the aldermen, all the alder persons. I'm less concerned with who speaks than who they are speaking for. So 27,476 Evanston citizens, 80.3% of the voters. And my understanding is virtually 1/3 of every man, woman, and child in the city of Evanston voted to repurpose this structure. And look at all the work that we had to do just to repurpose one structure in the city of Evanston.
Mr. Kruger, your time is up. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Support the Ethics Committee, support the voters, work for the voters, not for the special interests.
Ms. Kelly and Mr. Agnew, please.
Good evening. I'm Claire Kelly, and one of the complainants who filed charges against Alderman Ann Rainey for violating our code of ethics. You know, we're in a serious crisis right now in this town where the citizens are feeling very alienated from our city government, where we are feeling that our individual voices are being dismissed and disregarded, and not only through us as individuals, but through our commissions, through our boards as well. And so tonight, I think it's really, we were told also in regard to civic duty, I was also, the mayor recommended to me as well that, if I had some issues or distrust, that I should file a complaint. And I did. And I'm a Spanish teacher. I work all day, but I did it. I took out long hours on my evening to file this complaint, to do the research. And I hope you're not going to just simply widen that gap tonight between you all and the citizens by disregarding, once again, another recommendation by one of our boards. I mean, this is so important. Please uphold the recommendation from our Board of Ethics and prohibit Ann Rainey from voting any further on any matters related to the Harley Clark. And I have one more question. I'm sorry, this is unrelated to my 1 minute. So our attorney, we should be allotted then our time to finish our attorney's comments also. If Art Newman is going to get up and speak, we would also like that opportunity. Can we be afforded that opportunity, Chairman?
We'll see.
We'll see.
Yes, thank you, Ms.
Is it arbitrary, Judy? What's going on?
Yes,
why, if their attorney is going to be allowed time?
Don't argue with me, please. I will make that determination. Please. Mr. Agnew, did you want to speak?
Hello, I'm Nick Agnew. First of all, I want to echo what Jennifer Shader, my neighbor for a long time. You guys do a great job in a lot of ways. You also frustrate a lot of us in a lot of ways, and that's to be expected, but you have a hard job. I want you guys to know that. I'm impressed by a lot of the decision-making that goes on here, and then I'm dismayed by a lot of it that goes on here. That ethics committee, I learned so much sitting there. Props to them. Please do not dilute their message, their decision, and don't drown the voices of the city of Evanston that has told you almost 75 to 80% on what they want. Finally, Judy, I have supported you. You're my friend. You're my neighbor. I have seen you through good, through bad. I have believed in you in years past. I want to bring you back to the time when Mark Tendam, there was issues with fundraising, that there was an appearance of impropriety. Judy, there is an appearance of impropriety here with Ann Rainey, and I want to bring you back to that time that you, Claire, and I, and others were swimming in that. You were against it. I was against it. Claire was against it. Many others were. I want you to bring yourself back to that time because we have a parallel going on right here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. That's the end of citizen comment. Okay, so we will move on.
I believe I was on the list. But
I'm sorry, what is your
Jeremy
name?
Pardo. P-A-R-D-O-E.
Pardon? Did I? I can't find it.
Yeah, you mentioned his name earlier.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. Okay.
Hi, yes, I'd just like to read a letter from Adam Kingsley from the Merit Law Group.
Okay, Mr. Pardo, you have 1 minute only.
Okay, I'll skip to the main points. Despite the Board of Ethics recommendations in their November 28th memorandum, Wally Bobowitz and Ms. Mason Cup conclude that the only action available to the city is censure, and that the Board of Ethics recommendation is merely advisory. First, it's not true that the Council's only remedy with response to Ann Rainey's violations is censure. Section 110(9)D of the City's Code sets forth options, including other disciplinary action as determined by the appropriate city authority. Second, with respect to Alderman Rainey's recusal from future votes on Harley Clark, Section 11(1) sets forth, provides that an alderman is expected to vote yes or no when present, except on any matter which involves a direct personal or pecuniary interest or a conflict of interest.
Mr. Pardo, you're at your 1 minute. I'm sorry.
Okay.
But that'll have to be it.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Okay, thank you everyone for signing up for citizen comment. The first item on our agenda tonight, we have 13 items on our agenda. No, we have 15 items on our agenda tonight. So the first item after citizen comment is approval of the minutes of the regular meetings of October 16th, December 11th, and October 1st. So it's October 16th, 2017. And okay. Are there any corrections or changes? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, next one is December 11th, 2017. It's really confusing to hear voices from the audience when we're talking up here, so if you could all, thank you very much. Okay, so it's December 11th, 2017. There's been a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the third one is October 1st, 2018. Is there a motion?
Second.
Are there any corrections or additions? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed? Alrighty. The next item on the agenda is review of advisory opinion from the Board of Ethics regarding Alderman Rainey. Mr. City Manager.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, good evening. You have a memorandum before you from the Corporation Council and myself, and I think given the matter, if you wouldn't mind, I'll just go ahead and read the memorandum.
Sure.
On November 20th, 2018, the Board of Ethics issued two separate advisory opinions stemming from complaint number 18-BOE-002 and 18-BOE-003. Following a hearing, the Board found that Alderman Rainey violated the Code of Ethics. Attached for your reference are the advisory opinions issued pursuant to the City Code, Section 1-10-8, paren I. The Rules Committee is the appropriate city authority to review the advisory opinions to determine if any action will be taken. Section 10.4 of the Rules and Organization of the City Council provide, quote, any alderman who does not comply with the Evanston Code of Ethics may be censured by a majority vote of members present at a City Council meeting. And if I may, Madam Chair, members of the committee, since this has been questioned by some members of the public, the Board of Ethics and the Code of Ethics covers many officials, employees of the city, not just members of the City Council. To my knowledge, only the City Council in its rules has addressed any violation of the Code of Ethics and any issues arising from that. And so in your council's rules, there is only one option presented. As has been said, the code goes on to other options, other issues that could be raised, but the City Council has chosen through its rules to identify only one measure, and that is censure. If the Council were to choose to do something different, they would first have to address the issue of your rules before any other matter could be taken place. Just to finish the memorandum, the City Code, Council rules, and Roberts rules do not contain a definition of censure. The dictionary, however, includes among its definitions of censure a resolution by a legislative body expressing disapproval of a government official is intended to be a public admonishment either by resolution or motion for the described conduct. As quoted above, censure is the only option provided by the council rules. The Board of Ethics issued an advisory opinion which has no legal effect and cannot be enforced by the City Council, meaning the directives provided in the opinion, including recusal from voting, are advisory to the respondent. Madam Chair, members of the committee, we have provided for you the reports from the Ethics Board, and Ms. Mason-Cupp and I would be happy to answer any questions. Ms. Mason, do you want to just add anything at this point?
Good evening, Chair Fisk and members of the Rules Committee. I just wanted to supplement what the City Manager said. Under the City Code 1-10-9, subsection D, in part, many of the speakers have addressed that it does say may be subject to censure, suspension, removal from office, or employment, or any other disciplinary action as determined appropriate by the city authority. I wanted to give some context with this City Code section in relation to your City Council rules. First of all, suspension speaks to employees. My understanding is that the City Council certainly can't suspend an elected official. The city personnel rules for employees have elevated levels of discipline. Suspension speaks to employees, and that is the relief in part that could be sought. I didn't seek to explain further removal from office because that opinion certainly doesn't even come close to that. So I just wanted to point that out, that is what the City Code says, and so I address more specifically censure because it applies to elected officials.
Thank you, Ms. Mason-Cupp. Alderman Wilson.
And thank you. And I do appreciate, the comments, emails, correspondence, and some of the conversations we've had. But in looking at the ordinance itself, 10.2 subsection C and 10.2 establishes what the powers of the Ethics Committee are. And subsection C allows them to evaluate, make findings of fact, and issue advisory opinions. So clearly, they issue advisory opinions. They're not binding opinions. But before that is to me, is the important aspect here with relation to these penalties, the findings of fact. Now, they did that. We have a bunch of findings of fact in these two memorandums. But subsection 10.9D, that's an extra penalty. So you've got penalties and provisions throughout the code. We've got the council rules, but it says in addition to any other penalty that may be applicable, an officer employee. So that's in addition to. So this is extra. An officer or an employee who intentionally violates any provision. So I read these through several times. I did not find any findings of fact that Alderman Rainey intentionally did this. I found that they made findings that these things happened, but this is an additional penalty for somebody who intentionally does it. So in other words, they knew about it and they intended to do it. So it's plain reading of the ordinance, and so these are the extra things if you do it on purpose. Or everybody could just, mock me and laugh at me. But, I heard person after person saying we need to follow the rules, and I'm reading the rule that says who intentionally violates any provision. And I read the findings of fact, and there was no finding of fact that it was intentional. So that's the rule. So that leaves us with the conversation about the censure, which is what the council rules provide for.
Mayor Haggerty? No.
So I just had a...
It requires a finding of fact. So there's no finding of fact. Here's the stuff. Everybody can go back and read them. So
Yeah,
I'm not on the ethics board. I didn't write it. So
Right. We're not going to have a conversation right now between the alderman and the attendees. So
I just had a question for the city attorney. I read your memo. I read this letter from the attorney, so I appreciate you addressing section 1-10-9D. Did you make a statement to the ethics board about where they could go when it came to any kind of disciplinary measure based on their findings? Because I know everybody up here has a lot of respect for our boards and commissions and all of the citizens that serve on those boards and commissions, and take very seriously, any findings or recommendations that they make to the city council. And we're talking up here about, censure may be, if the council wants to go there, the only place that the council can go, unless, I guess, if they suspended the rules, as you said, and said they want to take a different action. But can you just talk to us about the ethics committee and what direction was or wasn't given to them?
I can't speak for this specific complaint because I am not the board liaison attorney to the Board of Ethics, but more generally, I can state that in this opinion and all of the past opinions, for example, in 003, complaint number 18 BOE 003, it states under number 10, this is an advisory opinion. It's repeatedly stated that this is advice contained within the opinion that's issued. It's stated that these are recommendations to put forth to the Rules Committee. So that was very clear that these are recommendations. Now, regarding whether or not it's enforceable for her to recuse herself, that I'm not certain, but the City Council rules under conflict of interest 11.1 indicates that an alderman is expected to vote yea or nay on all matters when present, except on any matter which involves a direct personal pecuniary interest or conflict of interest. But it states an alderman is expected to. It doesn't have a mandate. And the council rules, this is what the language indicates, that this is the remedy that's available for 10.4.
Mr. Newman, you're signed up. Do you want to take a minute to talk to us?
For those who don't know me, my name's Art Newman. I served on the council for 14 years. And I want to tell you, Ann Rainey is an elected official. There's a difference between an elected official and a city employee. When you read the ordinance, okay? The ordinance applies to both. It is very confusing. But elected officials get to be biased. If somebody wanted, when I was the first ward alderman, if somebody wanted to build a 15-story building on Orrington Avenue, I wouldn't listen to anybody on that. It's not going to happen. Elected officials can have opinions. And what I would suggest to you is the ethics board, everybody works hard around here. And they looked at these facts, and they came up with what their viewpoint was when they looked at a very complicated ordinance. Okay, when you're an officer in the parking office, got to treat everybody the same. Okay, when you're an elected official, you can advocate, you can take positions, you can decide you're not going to answer phone calls, you can decide you're not going to answer letters. The only people you're responsible to are the 8,500 people that elected you. Now, be very clear here. The board did not find any conflict of interest. Alderman Rainey isn't accused of having any personal interest in Harley Clark. None. There's no family member that has any interest. There's no nothing. Ann Rainey is doing the same thing that she's done for 30 years. She's voting her conscience. She believes that the city shouldn't spend any more money on Harley Clark. There's people here who disagree with her. But unless somebody here found on a city board that she has a financial interest in keeping the building, taking the building down, a family member has a financial interest, you're bound by your rules, and your corporation council and city manager have this exactly right. Things get emotional in this town. When Maple Avenue, we were going to put movie theaters on it, I got hundreds of communications that I was going to ruin the city. Things get tough, and elected officials have the right to make decisions. Now, I would suggest to you, there may be some of you here who say, well, maybe Ann Rainey shouldn't have acted that way. That does not make a violation of ethics. That does not empower the rest of you to have her not vote on a certain subject. She's doing the same thing she always did. She has a position. She believes in it strongly. Things got very hot around here, and she was subject to a lot of criticism, and there was things that went on, and maybe a mistake was made, which she apologized for, by the way. Okay? But that doesn't make this council, doesn't give this council the authority to disenfranchise 8,500 people on the issue of Harley Clark. So what I would suggest to you, in all due respect, this ordinance, which says employees and elected officials, two very distinct groups, very easily confused with the language. You got to have an ordinance, my suggestion is, for elected officials. You got to have an ordinance for the city employees, because they do have to treat everybody the same. An alderman doesn't have to. And so I want to tell you, you are bound by the rules. A group of aldermen who doesn't like how another alderman acts can't stop him from voting, period. Okay, so what I would suggest to you, if you want to go revisit the ordinance, you should do it. But I want to say one final thing about Alderman Rainey. And I've disagreed with her on hundreds of issues, hundreds. We spent 8 years together. But Alderman Rainey has spent thousands of hours on behalf of this city doing what she feels best is for the people of the 8th Ward. She has a ton to be proud of in her service to this city. Nothing to be ashamed of. Can she make a mistake in the heat of something? Maybe. But she has every right, and the only people she's responsible to are the voters of the 8th Ward. And people in this room may not like it, but that's what democracy is about. So what I would suggest to you, rewrite your ordinances, okay? But the heat of one issue and what the vote was on an issue doesn't empower this council or anybody else in the community to take away an alderman's vote. So I thank you for your time, and I know you'll do the right thing. And the last thing is, whatever you do, you're voting the best interest of the people of Evanston, not what one group comes to say at a specific time. Because it may happen to any one of you where you're on the wrong side of a big group. Could happen. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would like
Alderman Fleming.
I would like that went over by 4 minutes. I started
Alderman
timing
Fleming.
in a minute.
Yeah.
And we're at 4:12 now. So I would like.
You want me to just, maybe we have to get some kind of order here.
Pardon me?
I would like for our attorneys
I-
and others to be able to be read for full time for our attorneys.
You want me to just speak over her? I mean, that's... Wait, so now it's my turn to speak because I haven't spoken. So the chair heard you. It's. I didn't tell your attorney couldn't speak, but it is my turn to speak. Do I not get a chance to speak, or do only the attorneys get to speak? But okay, well, right now it's my turn to speak. And I think when your attorney spoke the first time, I listened.
No attorney was here.
I didn't speak either.
Madam
do I
Chair,
get to
point
speak
of
for the
order.
Ninth Ward, or do I just get to listen to everyone's attorney?
Floor.
But I didn't speak either.
Alderman
So
Fleming?
do I get to
Have
speak?
the floor.
Yes, you do.
Thank you.
You have the floor.
Can we need a little order here? I mean, I listened to 5 minutes of him. I didn't love it either. But I listened and I was respectful.
Ours was only allowed one.
But I didn't speak at all, Ms. Kelly. Yes, I am raising my voice because it's pretty rude to be sitting up here. I didn't disrupt anyone when they spoke. I turned my light on and I'm waiting to speak. I'm speaking now. All right, so my question, I have several. Corporation Counsel. So we have the city code, which you, I think, 110.9, and then you referenced the council code. So I know there's been other discussion in different topics where the city code and the council code have not had the same language. So can you explain how we rectify those two? Because there's a couple of things, and I know sometimes we have to update our council rules, but can you just clarify how we mesh when the council rules and the city code does not read the same way?
I would be happy to address that. So certainly the city code and the council rules need to be read together, but the city code is the law of the city. However, the remedies that are provided, that's what I was trying to address earlier, the remedies that are provided in subsection D are suspension, censure, suspension, removal from office, and other disciplinary action. Disciplinary action, it applies in this context to employees.
Go ahead, I'm listening.
Thank you. It applies to employees and it's elevated levels of discipline within the city's personnel manual. So that is what I believe the city code, and I feel pretty strongly about this, that is what the city code is speaking to. If this complaint were about a city employee, they could be subject to suspension. The city council as a body cannot suspend an elected official. And if you would like me to research it more fully, I certainly can issue an opinion on that. But you can't suspend an elected official.
Okay, so in the city...
I don't have that power.
So in the city council rules 11.1, where we have the conflict of interest and so on and so forth,
yes.
that is not, and I don't have the million papers here, but that is not the rule and recommendation that the ethics board laid out, correct?
The ethics board said that Alderman Rainey, I'm just paraphrasing this, but it's under number 9, the ethics board indicated that Alderman Rainey be prohibited from participating in and voting on matters underlying and related to Harley Clark Mansion. That is their recommendation and advisory opinion.
All right.
But in context, basically the city council, this is what I'm saying, is you're limited. It says only censure. However, an elected official, if there's a conflict of interest under 11.1, they are expected to recognize the conflict of interest and recuse from vote. But the council doesn't have the power to mandate that they act on that.
All right, so that second sentence or third sentence in 11.1, because the expectation is that they would themselves
They
abstain.
basically would evaluate the conflict, correct?
Right, and so where it says here at the end of that, if there is a conflict of interest in any matter before the council, consultation with the Board of Ethics is available.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, so thank you for that clarification. I do agree with Mr. Newman that we definitely need to update our code. I think we need to make sure that our Board of Ethics has appropriate training. I do think that if we're going to have citizens serve in these manners, we need to provide them great clarity. And unfortunately, I think now we're in the space where we realize that in hindsight, and so, kind of shame on us for that. I would just encourage the chair, I guess, to, Mr. Newman, as eloquent as he was, it was a little overkill for me. So if we're going to have attorneys speak, I'm happy for them to state the facts of their case, but I, personally don't feel like I need to be told how and why and what I should be voting for. It's just my 2 cents.
Okay, that's fine. Mr. Newman was appearing tonight on behalf of Alderman Rainey. Yeah, and Alderman Rainey is not speaking to this issue, so she's recused herself. Yeah, so she's recused herself on the discussion. So that's why Alderman Newman received more time than a regular commenter at citizen comment. Alderman Suffredin?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also have a question for Ms. Macecup. If the only punishment that was going to come of this was admonishment, why did the taxpayers of Evanston pay for outside counsel? I'm not trying to... But I mean, was there a possibility of a greater consequence? Could you please explain?
Well, the sanctions and penalties that are contained in 110(9), so some of the allegations alleged prohibited political activities, those carry a potential fine. Of course, they didn't even find that they had jurisdiction in those matters, but the corporation itself has a duty to defend elected and appointed officials in these matters. There is a past precedent for that, and so the city has to hire an attorney so that she can be represented.
Okay. And in your opinion, that duty continued even after there was finding that there was no prohibited political activity?
This is past practice that the elected official has been afforded an opportunity to be defended. I think it was a 2012 incident in which an attorney did represent the elected official.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, sure. I followed past practice.
Mayor Haggerty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do think, for fairness and everything else, that since we gave an attorney, for Alderman Rainey, 4 minutes to talk, that, doing so for those that, have a different opinion about the code and the regulations may just be helpful, certainly to me.
And I hear what you're saying. The reason why, as I explained, Alderman Newman was given the time was because Alderman Rainey has recused herself and cannot speak for herself. So that was the difference. That was the rationale.
I guess I understand that, but I just think that because Alderman Newman, or former Alderman Newman, is her sort of legal representation as well, and if the legal representation that has a different point of view is here, to give them the same amount of time just seems fair to me before we go into the discussion.
Right. We're going to do that for Alderman Ruth Simmons as well in the next agenda item.
Yeah, I guess because we're on this agenda item, that's why I was suggesting.
Right. Okay. Is that something that's acceptable to the? Okay. So who is the representative for?
So I'll read the letter I was reading earlier. You read some. You got to hear some of it.
We have the letter. We have read it.
Yeah,
so.
we've read it.
Yeah, well,
yeah.
For the public record. Thank you. For the public record.
It's in the minutes, so it's in the record.
Want me to read it? All right. First off, I thank you all, the City of Evanston, for your service. My name is Anish Parikh. Obviously, I'm not Anish Parikh. I'm just reading on his behalf. My name is Anish Parikh, and I'm an attorney who represents Ms. Lori Keenan and Ms. Claire Carey for the ethics complaints against Alderman Rainey. Recently, the Evanston Board of Ethics addressed the complaints of my clients and ultimately found ethical violations by Alderman Rainey based on City Code subsection 1-10-4 C3B2 and subsection 1-10-4 C1. In its findings and order, the Board of Ethics recommended that Alderman Rainey be prohibited from participating and voting on matters related to the Harley Clark Mansion. I understand that the matter shall next be considered by your committee this evening, and I'm writing today to express concerns with the advice that is being provided to you by the city. Specifically, I was alarmed to learn that the Evanston City Manager and Legal Department are not supporting the recommendation from the Evanston Board of Ethics regarding Alderman Rainey's prohibition on proceedings involving the Harley Clark Mansion. Contrary to the Evanston Code, it is my understanding that the city manager and legal department in their report for the upcoming vote are advising that nothing more than a mere censuring of Alderman Rainey be the only penalty imposed pursuant to the ethical violations. This would not only be contrary to the Board of Ethics recommendations, but it would also be in violation of the Evanston City Code. It appears that the city manager and legal department do not have a clear understanding of the Evanston City Code and are either misunderstanding, misleading, or misrepresenting the remedies available. In direct conflict with the advice rendered by the city manager and legal department, the Evanston City Code makes it clear that censuring Alderman Rainey is not the only option available to the Rules Committee. The advice of the city manager and legal department is incorrect and contrary to the Evanston Code of Ethics. Prohibition and recusal with respect to specified political activities are standard and common recommendations from ethics boards around the state. As the Board of Ethics has already determined, Alderman Rainey's prohibition against involvement in matters pertaining to the Harley Clark Mansion is likewise a legal and appropriate response to Alderman Rainey's ethical violation. In fact, the Evanston Code of Ethics clearly allows for this penalty to be imposed. Specifically, Section 1-10-9 of the Evanston Code of Ethics pertains to sanctions and penalties and states, quote, in addition to any other penalty that may be applicable, whether criminal or civil, an officer or employee who intentionally violates any provisions of this chapter may be subject to censure, suspension, removal from office, or employment or other disciplinary action as determined by the appropriate city authority. Accordingly, the representation by the city manager and legal department appears to be inaccurate and is as evidenced by the city's very own Code of Ethics. My concern about the representation being made to the Rules Committee, in addition to the inaccuracy, is with respect to dangerous precedents such as policy or rule would have on the Board of Ethics' very purpose of governing and preventing such ethical violations. Additionally, believing that a simple censure would prevent violations like those found against Alderman Rainey from occurring again is misplaced. I think Alderman Sufferton made that very clear. The violation at issue here pertained to the unethical conduct largely with respect to the Harley Clark Mansion, and as the Board of Ethics correctly found, the only way to prevent such conduct in the future is to prohibit Alderman Rainey from participating in these matters. Should Alderman Rainey's conduct be allowed to continue with repercussions and remedies like those recommended by the Board of Ethics, I fear the residents will continue to lack faith in Evanston's government and question whether procedures codified by the city code are being properly followed. I encourage your committee to consider the points raised here in determining the appropriate penalty for the Alderman Rainey's ethics violation. I understand that Alderman Rainey sits on the committee, and I can only request it this not be considered in your analysis. I trust this committee will institute the most appropriate repercussions. I thank you in advance for your respect in this matter. If you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to contact me. I guess I'd make one more comment before I see some more time, is that the point of this is I think you all know what really happened, and I think you all know what you really can do or can't do. And I think what's at stake here is the faith of your citizenry, what you decide to do. I really do think that's more important than you guys really think it is. Thank you.
Alderman Wilson.
Corporation Counsel. Wait.
I'd also like this letter from Adam Kingsley of the Merit Law Group to go on the record.
We've received it already. I believe it's in the packet.
And I want to apologize. I held up a letter saying we got the letter. So I appreciate you reading wherever you went. That letter, the first letter read, I did not have. So I've got the Kingsley letter. I hadn't received the other letter. So I appreciate having that one read. Okay. Okay. Corporation Counsel, I looked at the findings. I just want to double check. The Ethics Board did not make any affirmative findings that there was an intentional violation. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. If they had made a finding that there was an intentional violation, then subsection D could have come into play. Is that also correct?
Correct. The city code, as it reads, speaks to intentional conduct.
Okay. And so in the absence of those findings, the additional stuff doesn't apply. It just doesn't apply. So now what I'd like to do is start talking about what happened and figuring out where we go from there. And it's been said a few times, but we're elected to be advocates. So we're not elected to be impartial judges. And as many in the audience are well aware, for example, on the Harley Clark issue, which seems to be the trigger point for this, many, many years I've supported trying to find a useful purpose for the building. Ironically, people, I get bullied and threatened all the time, and ironically, it's a lot of times by people who supposedly are supporting saving the building. So strangely, that just seems to not get through to people that I've worked to save the building. But the point is, we constantly are bullied and threatened. I can speak for myself, I'll walk out of the room and people will say awful things to me. People will swear at me at the grocery store. People yelled at me at the Race Against Hate in front of my kids. So that's the kind of stuff that we constantly endure. And that just is part of the context for all of this. And, we're trying to advocate for you, but you kind of have to think about how you're advocating for yourselves. Now, these things, I'm not comfortable with what happened. In my home or with my friends, I use certain language that I don't use in public. So it's not okay to, in my opinion, it's not okay to approach a constituent in the context of a meeting and say something like that. I'm uncomfortable with the email issue also. So, those are things that happen. I wouldn't have handled them that way, but I'm just interested in hearing what the rest of the group has to say about it. But, as far as, what can or can't happen, I follow the rules. I want to follow the rules. I'm not going to start making stuff up, and the rules say what they say. Alderman Fleming, your point is extremely well taken. This ordinance needs a lot of work. I watched the videos, thank you, Mr. Coyne, of those meetings. They were very long. A lot of time, energy, and work went into it on behalf of everybody, including Alderman Rainey. But I feel like the commission didn't have a good quality product to work with in terms of the actual ordinance that they're trying to apply. So that's not fair to them. And that's something we can correct, but unfortunately it's after the fact. So all that said, I'm just kind of interested to hear what my colleagues have to say.
Alderman Nguyen.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And I echo Alderman Fleming and Alderman Wilson's points about the fact that we need a clear ethics ordinance, and we need to have training for our Board of Ethics, and clearly we need to have, as former Alderman Newman said, an ethics ordinance that applies to city staff and employees, and then an ordinance that applies to us, because our roles are different. When I look at the findings or the decision of the Board of Ethics, and they based their decision on deciding that Alderman Rainey was not impartial. When I read this, I thought none of us are impartial on this, and that's not our job. Our job is not to be impartial. Someone could just as easily have brought an ethics complaint against me because I have signaled, spoken, advocated, talked at my town hall meetings, spoken to people on the street, emailed people on my position on Harley Clark, which is the opposite of Alderman Rainey's position. But I've made it clear from the beginning that on Harley Clark, I don't want to demolish it. And so impartiality is not part of our job. You all ask us our opinions. You advocate to us. Part of our job up here is to advocate to each one of our other members of the council in order to gather the votes we need to pass something. And so, when I read this, I'm just confused and puzzled. None of us should vote on anything having to do with Harley Clark on the basis of impartiality. Not a one of us, because we've all expressed our opinion. We've all voted on it. So I am very confused. I am not satisfied with that. Do I also, as Alderman Wilson said, would I have acted in the same way and behaved in the same way? No, not necessarily. But many of the things that are described here are all part of our jobs, which is to discuss our opinions by email, to actively try to change viewpoints here on the council while we're voting or in attempting to vote. And yes, as Alderman Wilson said, I don't agree with using profanity, but that's not what they found here. What they found was that they said that Alderman Rainey had demonstrated her impartiality. Well, so have I. So I would like to hear, please, you know, I'm here and I have the mic and I listen carefully. So I'd like to hear what my fellow aldermen have to say as well. I have other things to say later on this evening, but on the basis of impartiality, I don't know how any of us are impartial.
Alderman Ravel.
Well, I second what my colleagues thus far have been saying. It really goes to the definition of impartiality, and that is the focus of the findings of the Board of Ethics. I certainly am big supporter of our boards and commissions and the time that our boards and commission members put into the job, but I think we clearly need to have a big conversation about the word impartiality, since that's such a big part of the Code of Ethics. I think when we first get an issue before us, that's the only time when we are impartial and weighing the issue, learning about it, and making up our minds. But then once we have a position, then we are advocates for that position. So I think that's our number one job, and I take that responsibility very seriously. And I think all of my colleagues up here, we all are making a decision that we believe is the best for our community. We certainly disagree about what that ultimate best for our community may be, but we all come to it with that goal in mind. And so once we reach that decision that is what we believe is best for our community, then we are out there advocating for it. And as Alderman Nguyen just mentioned, you know, some of us, we're ending up on different sides of that, but we have the same fervor and belief that the decision we have is the one that's the best for our community. So I guess I just have a hard time then trying to follow the recommendations from the Board of Ethics, given that I have this fundamental disagreement, I guess, over this question of impartiality.
Alderman Braithwaite.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I think I'd agree with some of the comments that were said from my fellow colleagues. I'm elected to make decisions, and I tell people all the time I have to make 50 decisions every other council meeting, and then we move on to the next topic. And so within that, I would move that we possibly table this or add it to our Rules Committee in January to take a look at the codes, and then we can flush it out a little bit more. But I think just based on the comments, there's really nothing here for us to vote on, Madam Chair, is what I'm gathering from the comments that I've heard. So.
Okay. So Alderman Braithwaite, I think if we receive and file the report, I just wanted to say that in the middle of last year, in conversation with Alderman Fleming, I expressed my concern about about the interpretation of the Code of Ethics at that time. I've talked to you, my colleagues on the council, long before any of this happened, about how I felt the Code of Ethics was confusing.
Sure.
And I was not sure that with a confusing code that the board really could understand exactly what they were doing. Certainly, the public didn't understand the code, and neither did we. So clearly, we need to go back and do that. And so my hope is that right now, the tentative agenda for the Rules Committee in January is looking at the code. You take over in February, so we'll pass the football on to you. But
thank you.
From what I hear from folks, including our corporation counsel, it may make most sense to have a code for employees and a code for elected officials. I think that will only help. Tonight, unfortunately, the Board of Ethics was supposed to make their annual report, but the chair could not attend. She had a conflict tonight. She will come in January, and it will be interesting to hear a little bit from her in the annual report from this year. But that's my recommendation, that we receive and place this report on file, and then move to the January meeting where we consider what we're going to do with the Code of Ethics.
If that's your motion, then I'll second it.
Well, we have some other folks who wanted to speak. Alderman Fleming, did you want to?
Yeah, I had another question for Corporation Counsel. So I've read this a lot, and I know that people in the audience keep saying abuse of power, and I don't see that in the findings listed here. So can you please, again, just say what their unanimous findings were, because I don't see abuse. I know people have mentioned it, but I don't see it listed here as their finding.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So if you turn to page 2, 7, looks like AB, it says the board finds that there's an ethical violation for the following allegations: abuse of power under city code section, then it cites the really long code section, and impartiality under.
Thank you. The next page. Yeah, now that I have it highlighted here, sorry, I was on the wrong page. Okay, so this is not, I was not elected to necessarily give my opinion on people's behavior. That's not. I have a lot of opinions about a lot of behavior, on the dais and out in the audience, and I don't think, many live up to my personal standard, but that's not what I'm here for. So the part about impartiality, I understand that we are partial. I also understand when citizens expect us to be impartial in the sense of not helping, someone or another build their case in a way that we haven't done it for each person. So I say frequently in my ward meetings, I make decisions and somebody hates it and someone loves it. I mean, it's, flip of a coin. And I am paid or elected to make decisions. I do think that the citizens expect us to make those decisions, I guess in a lack of a better term, in an honest manner that doesn't give more of a head start to one group versus the other. And it's part of the reason why I personally don't meet with developers, because I just think it leaves too much room for people to accuse me of stuff I'm not doing. So in the matter of the email, I think everyone understands when you send us an email, it's public, it can be FOIA'd, it is what it is. But with the issue with impartiality, I do agree with what my colleagues are saying. I mean, I have opinions about lots of things, but when I'm in the seat, I try to have opinions that are fair, and I try to not help one person more than I'd help another. And I think that for me becomes the issue when we look at the emails that talk about helping to fundraise and helping to build a case for one group. I definitely, like some things more than I like the other things. I was not necessarily, opposed to Harley Clark remain standing, but as I've told people, the one group that came forward when we had a very public process for reuse of the building didn't have the money and wouldn't get the insurance. And I told them that when I met with them before the RFP was even closed, so people can find me for that. But I was clear the whole time with them, and I did not go out and actively solicit another group. I did meet with the Dunes group when I decided that I was not supporting the Lighthouse group, but I did not work harder for one group than the other. So I think my assumption is that is what our citizen base expects of us, and I expect the same thing. So while I'm still, I can understand the citizens in terms of wanting us to represent everyone fairly, and we're not going to make everyone happy. And, some people you work with more than the others. I do think that we should at least condone or conduct ourselves in a manner that isn't, kind of using information from one group to build the case of another. I do agree with that. So in terms of what we're being asked to do tonight. I guess censure is our only option. I guess recusal is. I'm going to go with my, not that I don't believe people, but I'm going to looking at my city attorney, that we don't have the ability to tell someone not to vote for something. We would just kind of suggest. Is that correct?
Exactly. Strongly suggest. Please listen to the advisory opinion. Please read the advisory opinion. But in terms of a mandate from the council, that is not provided for in your rules. I hear that you would like to revise the code of ethics to evaluate this issue at a later date.
Right.
But certainly the four corners of the code of the actual code does not provide for a mandate on prospective votes.
Oh my gosh, that was a lot. Okay, so my opinion is that I do believe that it would best serve the citizens and this body and the city of Evanston if Alderman Rainey did not participate in the conversations. But I understand that that's my opinion, and I'm not the law to enforce that.
Alderman Wilson.
There's just a lot here. So when I look, to me, there are two categories of circumstances here. One is the impartiality thing. The other one is, approaching the citizen in the audience. But, going back to the impartiality part of it, I think everybody has to kind of be careful what you wish for. If we're going to go back and look to every council member who somehow either, in some way supported saving the building, that might not get you very far, and that might put you in a place you don't want to be, put you in a place you really don't want to be. So, you have to have faith that we're going to do what we're supposed to do. Like I talked about all this stuff, people say things to us. That's just the deal. You know what? I don't like it. None of us like it, but that's the deal. And we chose to do this. We choose to continue doing it. But we have to just kind of take what we hear, process it, and, notwithstanding the fact that people who support the building say, oh, I'm so terrible for trying to tear it down and I didn't do that, I have to dismiss that. And, it's frustrating and I get angry, but I have to compartmentalize that. And I think that's what all 9 of us are required to do on a regular basis. Now, you might decide at some point, you know what, certain aldermen's not doing that. They're not doing that, and I'm going to run or I'm going to, support somebody else. That's why we have the electoral process. But, so that impartiality part, it's just, I'm not getting there. I am very uncomfortable with what happened at the hearing. And again, hopefully I'll never do anything like that. I don't think I will. But Ms. Keenan, I saw all the videos. I saw everything that there was to see, and what I'm saying is I'm not comfortable with what happened. So again, all of these things in this list aren't options for us, but I just don't think that that was appropriate conduct.
Mayor Haggerty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is interesting because normally I don't vote on anything, and I think Alderman Rainey has suggested a couple times that perhaps the mayor should be removed from the Rules Committee. Thanks a lot for not acting on that, Ann. Jeez. So I am gonna have a vote tonight, and a lot of times people email me and say, on the Harley Clark debate, Mayor, you're conflicted. You're conflicted because you live near Harley Clark, and it would be advantageous to you if that mansion was demolished, your property value would go up. I don't know if that's true or not. And unlike, my colleagues up here, I haven't had to vote on this. I haven't had to take a position on, the dunes or Evanston Lake House and Gardens. But I throw that out there. Am I conflicted or not? I think the question tonight is about what is a conflict of interest? How do you define, impartiality? I've read all the materials. I've received lots of emails from people, and I appreciate it. Here are the facts in my in my mind. First, Alderman Rainey, long before she was supporting demolition of the mansion, supported saving the mansion, and it was with private investment in the mansion and Colonel Pritzker's proposal long ago. She didn't support the Evanston Lake House and Garden proposal, and she was pretty forthcoming in that. She did give money, $100, to a group, the Dunes Group, that she did support that option. She did encourage others to give money to that group in her ward using her city email. She did swear at a resident at a meeting that I was chairing in the back, and those, you know, and so those were some of the facts, right? My thoughts, you know, on all of this is that, you know, Alderman Rainey is promoting and advancing an interest that she agrees with. That's what all of these folks up here do on a variety of issues. All the aldermen do that. No different than Alderman Revelle promoting and advancing the Evanston Lake House and Gardens earlier in the process when they were up. And, you know, when she was advocating and working hard to advocate that, hey, we should have a 2-month RFP process, and we should really give them a shot. That's what aldermen do, again, on a variety of issues. Well, I don't appreciate that Alderman Rainey at times tries to provoke and incite and bully people. I will tell you this. Alderman Rainey cares very, very deeply about her ward and about the city of Evanston. Despite aspects of her style that I personally find unbecoming, the constituents of her ward have repeatedly elected her to be their representative. In my 18 months, I am not aware of Alderman Rainey taking any position, including on Harley Clark, to enrich herself personally. Ethics laws are in large part intended to make sure that government employees and elected ones are not using their positions to enrich themselves. Well, I resent that Alderman Rainey has not, you know, personally apologized to her colleagues up here for getting us into this situation through using her city email to encourage other people to give to a cause and to using profanity. I think that would have been the right thing, Alderman, to come up here and do. I don't think we should deny constituents of her ward a vote on the Harley Clark. To disenfranchise the 8th Ward residents is undemocratic. Those that would like to see us, not surprisingly, take a different position on Harley Clark than Alderman Rainey have written, have come up and spoken to eliminating her from that conversation, and applying the rules or the recommendation of the Ethics Board. I am supportive of censoring Alderman Rainey as a firm message that she must modify her behavior to fit in with the standards of others on this council and work harder to uphold those.
Alderman Suffredin and then Alderman Fleming.
Sure. Just a question again for Corporation Counsel. Rule 11.1, does that allow an alderman to voluntarily recuse himself without admission of a conflict of interest?
Yes.
So an individual alderman can make the choice
Correct.
to recuse himself?
Oh, it uses the word elect.
Okay. I'm just going to respectfully request that you consider that, Alderman Rainey. I understand where we are in this process, and that if that was something that you were going to do, you would have done it sooner, but I think if we look at all the time, energy, expense that's been put into this, it's a silly issue. It's a bundle of bricks. Let's put it behind us and do more important things with our time.
I have no conflict of interest.
But
Sorry, it actually uses the word expected. Sorry.
I mean, but an alderman could choose to recuse himself without an admission that they do have a conflict of interest.
Correct.
So it wouldn't be a conflict of interest. It wouldn't be an admission of a conflict of interest. It would just be a voluntary choice in the interest of the city that we all serve to recuse yourself from voting on this issue so we can move on to more important things.
Correct. In the abundance of caution, they could recuse themselves.
And I'm just respectfully requesting that you consider that.
Alderman Fleming.
I was just going to say, can we call the question? Is there a question to call?
Yes, we have a motion on the table to place and file.
But I thought that motion was by Alderman Braithwaite.
It was seconded. That's what's.
But
on the table right
hold
now.
on. But it was to put and discuss next month, correct?
Or changes to the rules, Alderman.
Yeah.
All right, so yeah, is that two things? Then we need to decide about the rules change and this, or we only, I guess I heard your.
Can you please just repeat your motion?
Yes, the
Thank you.
motion is to accept the report of the Ethics Board, place it on file.
And then the second part?
Well, place it on file, to accept and place. Mr. City Manager, what's the right language?
I'm sorry, before he speaks, there is a motion on the floor, so I will second that motion.
Right.
And then if you want to go into discussion, or you can
Okay.
call the question.
Right, okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, Mr. City Manager, could you explain?
And I'll look to the Corporation Counsel to make sure I'm saying this correctly, but it's a standard practice for a matter under Robert's Rules of Order that if no action is required or desired by the governing body, then and this is the case, it was a report, that the report is then received by the City Council, by the Rules Committee, and placing it on file then indicates no further action.
Okay.
Ms. Mason,
So received replaces accept.
The City Council rule under 10.4 says the City Council may censure. So that basically, City Council has to, if you were opting to censure, you may censure.
But if they choose to take no action.
They can choose to take no action.
So are you comfortable, Madam City Attorney, that receive and place on file is an appropriate motion for the matter?
So what the Rules Committee would then report back to under L would be a report and a minutes that no action was taken.
So that would be transmitted back to the
That would be
Ethics Board.
transmitted back to the Ethics Board.
And so you're comfortable with receive and place on file as a motion in order to accomplish that?
What about censure?
If the council wishes to take no action on the report, what would you suggest as the appropriate motion?
My preference is that you actually take a vote on what you want to do. But if it's accept and place on file, that's not provided for within the rules. It says a written report of any action taken. So then the report would read, no action was taken. They accepted and placed on file.
So that's sufficient?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So that would be the motion. Yeah. And that's been seconded. Okay, any discussion on the motion? I just want to remind everyone, we have 10 more items on our agenda. Human Services is supposed to begin in 1 minute. Not sure how we get through all of this, so. Alderman Nguyen.
Motion on the table. Just.
This is me discussing it. I think I'm somewhat confused. So by receiving and placing it on file, we are determining that it is essentially to vote yes on receiving and putting this on file is the equivalent of voting no on censure.
No, I think they're two different things.
Sorry, I should turn on my mic. It says a report can be issued, so then the report would essentially be the minutes of the Rules Committee in which you chose not to take censure. You did not choose to censure. So therefore, I think you should just take a motion and a vote on censure or not censure.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
Whose motion was it?
Mine. It's my motion. If, as Alderman Wilson said, this doesn't rise to the level of a violation of the Code of Ethics.
No intentional conduct was referenced in the report.
Then how can we censure if it doesn't rise to the level?
It's different.
Okay, all right. Then just explain to me.
Under 10.4 under the City Council rules, any violation of the Code of Ethics is not limited under City Council rules. The Board of Ethics found that Alderman Rainey violated 2 different sections of the Code of Ethics.
Right, okay. Alderman Wilson, do you want to speak to that?
Well, the comments I had on 10.9D were just on the extra penalties. That's all they're related to.
Right. I believe.
All the question. Oh, I'm sorry.
I just want to finish. I believe it should be made. It should be made clearer that by receiving and putting on file, the council is voting no on censure. If you vote yes on that, you're voting no on censure. I think that's very confusing to leave the motion like that. And I would suggest that the maker of the motion modify the motion to be very clear in terms of what the outcome is.
And what is the result of censure?
No,
I'm just asking what's the result?
Censure is a public admonishment. It's a statement of the public body of certain conduct. It was not acceptable to the city council. That is a censure.
So, okay. So let's say another alderman has done that Alderman Rainey has supposedly been found to do, but there has been no complaint made to the ethics board on that.
The question that's before you is the ethics finding
Yeah.
under 10.4.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Call the question.
Okay.
We have to vote on calling the question.
That is correct.
Yeah, I know. I'm about ready to do that. I'm just
Call
wondering
it.
if there's anyone else who wants to speak. Okay, all those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. I'm sorry, to call the question. We're calling the question. Does everyone want to call the question? Everybody in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Who's opposed to calling the question?
No, we don't vote on calling the question. Alderman
Okay.
Fisk. I'm
No,
sorry.
you do vote on calling the question.
We're voting on calling the question.
Yeah.
We vote to call the question.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, I see. I changed my vote.
Okay, everybody's in favor of calling the question except Alderman Fleming. Anyone else? Okay. So it's 7-1. Okay. Then we're going to the motion itself.
And could we have that motion again?
Yes. Corporation Counsel, could you read the motion, please?
My understanding, Alderman Fisk, from your motion was that you accepted to place the advisory opinions on file, and therefore, I don't know if Alderman Nguyen made a friendly amendment, but I don't. That was the actual question that was posed.
Okay.
Was to receipt and place on file.
Okay, and that's been questioned. Okay. All of those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No, I'm opposed.
No.
Okay. Let's do a roll call then.
No. Oh,
Oh, okay. Dar, could you call the roll?
Mayor Haggerty,
no.
Alderman Braithwaite,
Aye.
Alderman Nguyen, Alderman Wilson,
No.
Alderman Fisk,
Aye.
No.
Alderman Bell, Alderman Rainey,
No.
5-4, right? 5-4. 5-4. There's recent in here.
It's a banana republic.
Okay. So the motion passes 5-4.
Kangaroo court.
Okay, we're going to, I just did. Yes.
Oh.
Okay. Okay. Alderman Nguyen?
I don't think your microphone's on. Is your mic on?
I apologize. Go ahead, Alderman, Madam Chair, and then I'd like to say something.
Okay. Dar.
Mayor Haggerty was a no. Alderman Braithwaite was a yes. Alderman Nguyen was a yes. Alderman Wilson was a no. Alderman Fisk was a yes. Alderman Sufferton was a no. Alderman Revelle was a yes. Alderman Rainey was a yes. And Alderman Fleming was a no.
Okay, Alderman Nguyen? Alderman Nguyen, go ahead. Yeah, okay. Michelle, do you want to explain the motion again? Is everyone listening? No. Yeah, what does it mean?
The motion is that the Rules Committee accepted the advisory opinions and the recommendations contained therein and accepted and placed them on file. The council or the Rules Committee did not vote to make a censure.
Okay. Mayor Haggerty?
I just have a procedural question. So, if there's an ethics complaint against any of us up here, there's nothing in the rules that prohibit us from voting on a complaint that's filed against us?
Yes, the council rules do not speak to this issue. It is silent.
All right. Well, if we're going to look at the ethics rules, I think we ought to look at that one too.
Okay. Yeah, we'll look at all of it. Yeah, Alderman Nguyen.
Okay. I would like, when we come back in January for our January meeting, I would like us to put on that agenda a discussion of the use of profanity by any member of the city council towards any other member of the city council, towards the city staff, and towards any member of the public while they are acting as an alderman.
What about threats?
Okay. Mayor, I'm sorry, Alderman Braithwaite?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Does that need a second?
I'm going to second that.
It's a referral, isn't that correct?
To also,
it's a referral.
Yeah. Yes.
It doesn't.
The reason that I didn't vote no is because I think we've all experienced bad language in many different places. Mm-hmm. And so I'm actually going to look to the public on this, and I would love to receive an email. I have received the same threats, bad behavior, foul language, and I think if we're going to really focus on the public setting of a meeting, that what happens if a resident uses that same type of language in threatening tone towards her. Right. We're all bulletproof up here. None of us have families or feelings when people use profanity and threaten us.
Don't run.
Yeah, there you have it. I would like to be able to explore that civility on behalf of the residents, and that's what I'm directing our corporate council. I would like to research that to see if there are any municipalities that have that civility rule within a public setting.
Okay.
Yes,
okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Alderman Suffredin?
I'll just pass.
Okay. All right. We've got some other things that we absolutely have to do tonight. So, Preservation Commission appeals to the City Council. Mr. City Manager.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, the Corporation Council and I have prepared a memorandum regarding the appeal process to the Preservation Commission on decisions of the certificates of appropriateness pursuant to the City Code Section 288G7, the authority to review, grant, or deny appeals of certificate of appropriateness pursuant to the subsection shall vest in the Planning and Development Committee so long as the membership of said committee consists of all seated aldermen. Otherwise, said authority rests with the council or its duly authorized committee. Since the Planning and Development Committee does not consist of all seated aldermen, the City Council holds the power to review the request for an appeal and accepted subsequently hear the appeal. We are asking that the council confirm this understanding. There is a matter that is proposed to come back to the council at your next meeting on December 10th. Based on the previous understanding, that matter would be placed before the full City Council rather than go to the Planning and Development Committee, since the current makeup of the Planning and Development Committee does not consist of all seated aldermen. Right. So we're asking this evening for the confirmation of what is the practice. We all recognize that this language is not as clear as it should be, and I know that the Law Department has on its docket an opportunity to review this language at a future time. Is that correct, Ms. Mason-Cup?
If it's the direction of the City Council that we will revise the rules, we can, but the plain reading of the rules is that it does go to the full City Council.
Mm-hmm.
So I move that we accept the interpretation and file this interpretation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Is there a second? Anybody going to second? I'll second. Okay. All right. Alderman Nguyen, did you want to speak to this? Were you reaching for your light?
Well, I was reaching for my my light. So I've thought about this quite a bit, and this Edgemere Court is in my ward, and I would have preferred that it came to Planning and Development first. That wasn't what we did. and the issue there for me was the process. But when I look at in the past, and it's interesting that we have former Alderman Newman here, and when we have had appeals from the Preservation Commission before, the Planning and Development Committee has looked really in great detail at the issues of preservation about with respect to the applicant. And when I think about the times when we've had this come before us, that took a lot of time on the part of the Planning and Development Committee. And I don't know, and I mean, that is the committee, that is the Land Use Committee. And there's a reason why it goes to a committee for review first. Alderman Newman might remember that we had a landmark farmhouse that came to us. The Preservation Commission had denied the family the type of addition that they wanted to do because it would have actually destroyed the aspects of the house that were a landmark. And we spent a lot of time at Planning and Development discussing this back and forth, and ultimately we supported the Preservation Commission, which I will say had made a very thoughtful suggestion to the owners on how they could add to their house and not lose their landmark status. So, I look at this and I think, when we have these issues come to us, we're reviewing what the Preservation Commission did in a lot of detail, which is what a committee is supposed to do.
Mayor Haggerty?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I'm listening to you, Alderman Nguyen, and then I'm unclear. My understanding, City Attorney, was that in the past, when there have been appeals of the Preservation Commission, they have come to the full City Council. Alderman Nguyen, I thought, unless I misunderstood, that you were saying that they have come to the Planning and Development Committee?
My memory is probably not as good as others, and Alderman Newman might have a better memory than I do, but I distinctly remember, I even know where the house is that we discussed. So my memory was that it came to Planning and Development.
Okay, so City Attorney, I mean, you guys have done the research on this.
That was probably quite a while.
What did you find?
Alderman Nguyen and members of the Rules Committee, the Community Development Director did some research along with her staff, and the past appeals for at least the last 10 years have all gone to the full City Council. So we did check past practice to ensure that our interpretation was correct. Now, maybe that was prior to the adoption. We even went all the way back to the mid-90s, and that was still the case. My memory is faulty. Yeah. So, this is what their research showed.
So I think we can all agree. I don't know if we can all agree, because I certainly have looked at these regulations, and based on my reading of it and the fact that the Planning and Development Committee only has 7 of the 9 City Council members, read it to say, okay, it should come here. On July, and I want to go back to the 917 Edgemere, because that's when it came up 6 months earlier. I prefaced the discussion at the City Council meeting that the regulations are ambiguous on the appeal process, that I consulted with the city's Corporation Council, and that they concluded that it should go to the full City Council. I had several email exchanges with Alderman Fisk and Alderman Rainey, and not surprisingly, and consistent with our prior email communication, both Alderman Fisk and Rainey vehemently and definitively stated that I was wrong and that it should go to the Planning and Development Committee. Alderman Nguyen also concurred, as she stated, sort of with that, but wasn't sort of publicly vociferous in her opinion. So, Alderman Nguyen, I appreciate that. I am not standing up here today and telling you I know definitively whether this should go to the full City Council or it should go to Planning and Development. All I'm asking is that we have an honest conversation and give some direction here to the full body on where this appeal of the Preservation Commission's finding on Harley Clark should go.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'll weigh in here for a moment. So the decision was on Edgemere, 917 Edgemere, to send it to the full City Council, and that to me establishes some precedent there. I did ask staff if they would check, because it could be at some point, and Alderman Newman, you may remember this, at some point, I'm glad you're here, the Planning and Development Committee, I believe, consisted of all the members on the City Council for a short time. It never did. I thought I remembered everybody's. There was a short time because no one wanted not to be on P&D because that was where the action was. And I asked staff if they could tell me when that was. It was sometime in the 90s, I think. My guess is that that's where the wording came from, but I don't know that, and I'm not going to take the time to try to figure it out. But I do think that now with Edgemere Court, and we've created a precedent. And
I have a little bit of legislative history. 2006, Ordinance 11706, Alderman Wolin noted that one of the concerns of the Preservation Commission is that the City Council could change from presently being all 9 aldermen to a decreasing number in the future.
Yeah.
Alderman motioned to amend the ordinance to state that all 9 aldermen be present on the Planning and Development Committee. Alderman Wynn actually seconded that motion to amend the ordinance, and it was passed 9-0 to address the concern that all 9 aldermen be present.
Okay,
so if that helps.
No, it does.
That time must have.
And that means that we should consider it as a full council. Yeah.
Just
Yeah. Mayor Haggerty.
So just for the record, then, Alderman Fisk or Chairman Fisk, you're suggesting that we consider it for the whole based on what the city attorney just said, not because the mayor screwed up on July 9th and moved it to the full city council?
Right.
Thank you, Alderman Fisk.
And I'm not sure you screwed up, so.
So, Madam Chair, members of the committee, we will then bring back to the council on December 10th the request of the appeal. If that request to the full city council, if that request is granted, then that would come, the actual appeal itself would come before the council in January.
Right.
We'll have that on as a regular item.
Oh, do we need a vote on that?
No, I think that you're
direction.
confirming existing language. Okay. We just wanted to have the conversation tonight versus next Monday night.
Correct. And we also just wanted direction if you wanted just to amend this appeal process, 288. But it sounds like we can leave it as is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not now. That's for when Alderman Braithwaite is chair.
Okay.
Okay, item 6, and I'm just going to go to the items that we really need to cover tonight, and we'll just have to put some of this on the agenda for January.
Whatever you like, Madam Chair.
So direction to the Board of Ethics on appeals and motion for reconsideration regarding rehearing issues. Mr. City Manager?
Yes. Once again, a memorandum from the Corporation Council and myself on page 27 of your packet. The Board of Ethics has made a request to the Rules Committee for some guidance regarding a respect to a motion for reconsideration. The Board of Ethics, I'll just read the memorandum given the topic. The administration of the Code of Ethics is silent on appeals to the Board of Ethics decisions. Typically, the City Code addresses appeals and outlines the process to appeal a decision. On November 5th, 2018, an individual filed a motion for reconsideration viewed as an appeal by the Board following a hearing on October 24th. The Board found that it cannot conduct an appeal because the Board cannot review its own decision on appeal. In addition, the Board sought clarity on if an appeal can be afforded. The Board reviewed the motion for reconsideration and addressed it in their findings, and that is detailed at the bottom of the page there, saying, therefore, the Board of Ethics asks the Rules Committee to make a determination on how one appeals a decision of the Board of Ethics, and if the matter should be addressed by the Rules Committee or referred to the City Council, who can appoint a hearing officer and hold a hearing on this matter. So this is a request from the Board of Ethics asking for guidance.
Mr. Jones, would you like to address this?
Hello again, everyone. It's been a while. My name is Sean Jones, and I am representing Alderman Robin Rue Simmons. I will state for the record at the outset that I instructed my client not to be here because I don't believe it's appropriate for her to even be sitting up here when a matter concerning a Board of Ethics claim against her is pending before you. Obviously, some here disagree with that, and apparently we just broke a 4-4 tie with Alderman Rainey voting not to censor herself.
Mr. Jones, you're here to speak on this particular issue.
All I'm saying is there has to be a better way to conduct Board of Ethics hearings and to deal with these matters. My client first received a Board of Ethics complaint in 2017. The Board of Ethics dealt with that and found no impropriety. Again, Board of Ethics complaint was filed on February 11th, 2018. It was heard on March 20th. It was heard on June 19th, August 21st, September 25th, October 24th, and November 20th. Her mother was accosted in the hallway by people talking about this Board of Ethics. There's just got to be a better way. And now, even after all of these hearings, there's a request from the complainant, who, of course, was a political opponent and lost, for another rehearing. You all have discussed it, and hopefully you will revisit your code of ethics. But part of that has to be streamlining this process so that a client, whether it be an employee, whether it be an elected official, doesn't have to go through 7 or 8 hearings on a single Board of Ethics complaint. I trust that you will do the right thing and decide that there is no right to an appeal, that 7, 8 hearings is enough. But I also would say, I echo some of what you're saying, that we as a community need to do better. We need to treat our elected officials better. We need to be more civil as a whole. I hope everyone would take it to heart, but I also hope that you will do the right thing and say that there is no appeal, that accept and place this on file and let's move on. 7 hearings is enough. Thank you.
Are you an attorney? No. Is that all right? What do you think?
Sure. Why not?
Okay. Is everyone all right with that? Okay. If you can just no more than 2 minutes, please.
Also, she was not informed of this agenda item. So I'm reading a comment from Misty Wittenberg, the complainant from 18 Board of Ethics 001, who can't be here tonight because she's celebrating Hanukkah with her family. The advisory opinion that you are reading tonight is not representative of Ms. Wittenberg's complaint. Both the consideration, the arguments provided, and the findings were drafted by the respondent's primary legal, as listed on the city website, and provided to the board in memos dated March 20th and May 22nd. Ms. Wittenberg is seeking consideration by an impartial body or hearing officer and would prefer to keep this case within the city. If the city council allows her that opportunity, she thanks you for your time.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, what was your name, please?
I'm Meg Welch.
Alderman Nguyen and then Alderman Braithwaite.
Well, I would like to comment that I do think that when we bring back our ethics ordinance, we need to have a provision in it that provides for the equivalent of a Rule 11, which prohibits constant filing of frivolous complaints. And in the Code of Civil Procedure, if you're prohibited, anyone is prohibited from continually filing a complaint and on penalty of sanction from a judge. And I think in this instance, I'd like to find out what other Board of Ethics have done. Clearly, this can't be the first time this has happened. I think it's unfair. We need to have some ability to stop someone from weaponizing a Board of Ethics complaint and causing the type of repeated hearings and that Alderman Ruth Simmons has had to go through. They reached a decision. We need to reach conclusion, and we need to have something in our rules, just as we have in federal rules of civil procedure, that prohibit you from making a slight modification and filing again. That's a waste of the time of the Board of Ethics. It's a waste of other people's time and money, and it's not fair. It's a waste of the public's tax dollars. So we need to make sure we have that in a new ethics ordinance.
Okay.
And I think that, and with respect to this, I think that the Board of Ethics decision should be considered final.
Okay, I want to remind everyone that that Alderman Wynn's has the request by Claire Kelly to make a 10-minute presentation has been deferred until the meeting tonight. This is a continuation of Alderman Wynn's acceptance of her. So we need to move along. We're going to be starting.
Can I just make a motion then to?
Absolutely. You're
Sure.
right here on my list. I just wanted to remind everybody that we're tacking 10 more minutes
so I'd
onto
like to make
this
a quick motion, Madam
automatically.
Chair. I'd like to move that we receive this report, put it on file, and deny the appeal.
Deny the action? No action.
I just ask
Oh.
corporation.
Okay.
It's simple, so that the memo indicates that the board is seeking guidance to confirm that the code doesn't provide for an appeal, and so simply the Rules Committee needs to state that.
Okay.
Right. So I'll repeat my motion that we receive and file and deny the appeal.
Well, no.
And there is no appeal.
Right. There's
Right. Right. Everybody clear?
Okay.
Thank you.
I will second that.
All right.
And now we have discussion, but Alderman Ravel wanted to speak, and then Alderman Fleming.
I just wanted to echo what Alderman Wynn was saying, that we can't let the Code of Ethics be used as a tool to harass elected officials. And one suggestion that we might look at would be whether some of the complaints, when you look at the details, some of them could be handled administratively, because some of them very clearly weren't issues that fell under the jurisdiction of the Board of Ethics, and so then it could have streamlined what the Board of Ethics did have to deal with.
Okay, Alderman Fleming.
My only, in reading this, I don't know if it benefits the city or the complainant, quite frankly, or as Alderman Suffredin said, the amount that we, as taxpayers, I pay taxes to, pay for outside counsel. In a case like this where, it's the continuation of what I understand to be kind of the same case, I do think, again, we need to look at our ethics board, and there does need to be some kind of ability for people to have, to appeal or to reappeal, their case. But in this case, it does seem like it has gone through as much as it can with our current ethics board, with the information they have. If Ms. Wittenberg has a new case to bring forward, obviously that's available for her, but I just don't see the benefit of having the same people with the same rules look at what I assume to be the same facts and assume they're going to come up with another decision. As I had from Mr. Newman, I appreciate Mr. Jones, but I don't. Oh, I lost my head. I was going to chastise you, and I forgot what I was going to say. But I do think I want us, again, to remain clear of accusations. Oh, my thing to you was just, I don't think it, for me, makes a difference whether or not she lost a previous case. I mean, it could be a neighbor who just doesn't like you. I think we'd have to make sure we use our ethics board and code appropriately, and we're not taking people through there unnecessarily. But I don't think that, as an attorney, you need to mention that this was maybe the reason why she's going through that process. But I would also say in this case, I will not support the continuation of this case.
Okay, so let's call the question.
Oh, and my last thing, sorry, I do want to make sure, and I don't know, but according to Ms. Welch, I do just want to encourage staff to make sure that people are notified when there is, their case or, their topic is going to be on the agenda. I'm not asking if we did or not. I just want to say publicly, I want to make sure people are notified. We've had that with the CPAC cases where people say they don't know that it's coming before the Human Services.
My understanding is that she was notified.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so let's call the question. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. There's some other the business that we need to get through. Alderman Fleming, can we put your the Administration and Public Works question on for January? Is that okay? And along with the amending City Council rules to set time to end council meetings, that'll be January. The Alderman Committee chair rotation, is that something we need to do tonight?
I believe Ms. Francelno that has been completed, and there's a schedule that's been prepared. Is that correct? No.
No.
I only got one report, and that was from Alderman.
Okay. All right, so why don't we have it back in for January?
Okay, that's January.
Well, I have a
2.
question. Can we just accept the parking and transportation because we're set to start that rotation in January? So can we just approve that rotation?
Move to approve the parking rotation.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
And we'll come back with a full report on the balance.
Okay, the 2019 City Council meeting schedule.
That is on the very last page of your packet. I think this is largely consistent with past practice. I think the council had talked about having a meeting, the first meeting in February about on affordable housing, so that's reflected there. And I think as we do, we kind of take the President's Day week and the Martin Luther King week in January and February, kind of based on the business before. So there have been cancellations of those meetings, so we just point that out. But otherwise, we'd ask that the council concur in the meeting schedule.
Okay. Mayor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The one we talked about last year that several people had a challenge with is spring break, the Monday of spring break. And if you went with the public school spring break, I'm not sure if that's the 18th or the 25th this year.
Hold on, we'll find out.
And again, if it works for everybody, I can tell you I've got a problem with both of those.
Yeah, maybe 1, 2.
It's the 25th. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I'm out of town. So, sorry.
So the 2018-2019 school calendar is the week of the 25th.
Yep.
Of March.
I second.
Alderman Sufferton?
Oh, wait, not on this thing.
Okay.
All right, let's get through this
That's
one.
a great idea. Yeah, do this next time.
All right.
Separate topic.
Okay, is everybody okay with that? Otherwise, we'll change the date? Okay, all right.
So we would remove the date. So we would have the 3 meetings, the 4th, the 11th, and the 18th of March.
Okay.
Yep. I'm sorry?
Could you talk in your mic, please?
I apologize. March 4th.
Yeah, please.
Wait. We were talking about removing March 25th.
Correct.
Right. So we'll have I haven't figured out the Rules Committee schedule yet, but certainly Human Services on the 4th. We would have a council meeting on the 11th. The 18th is the 3rd Monday, so that is in your rules a council meeting. And so we would just move whatever business we would need to from the 25th to the 18th.
To the 18th. Okay, fine. Okay. I move approval of the city council meetings for 2019.
Yeah. Okay, everybody?
Not on the spring break thing, but we had talked about doing an intermediate city manager evaluation in the spring.
Oh, right. Okay.
And that's not reflected on this schedule.
Okay.
So
well,
Alderman Sufferton, the mayor and I have been talking about when to have the meeting that didn't happen prior to that meeting. So we're going to try to have a goal-setting meeting or objective-setting meeting for the city manager in January, and then once we've done that, schedule the next one.
Okay, so
we'll come back with a revised schedule.
This is a draft schedule, and there'll be a revised schedule reflecting that.
We would do that in executive. Alderman Sufferton, just a point of clarification. That would happen.
Right, but I'd like to see it on the calendar.
We would put it on the calendar.
You'd put it on the calendar.
Yeah.
So that's January?
This year we got to the end of the year, and we're like, oh.
Got it.
We forgot to do the city manager evaluation.
Noted.
I'd like that not to happen again.
We did it, but what we're trying to do is we're trying to move it closer to the middle of the year is what we're trying to do, which I think historically where it's been.
But we're also trying to do, we talked about doing kind of a quarterly check-in.
Correct.
Yes. So
that would be sometime in March, right?
We missed the first one.
We missed the first one
because
already.
of the budget. And so Mayor Haggerty has asked me to poll you perhaps right after the first of the year for a date in the month of January.
Okay, so we could add to the rules, if we have a rules committee in January, which I'm hoping we do, we could add that, piggyback that onto the rules committee.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Did we vote? Did we? Okay.
Called.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Okay, so setting a special rules committee in January to discuss the code of ethics.
So, Madam Chair, members of the committee, you have 4 Mondays in January. Mayor Haggerty has asked that we look for a time for the city manager goal objective setting as a date, and then we would have a rules committee meeting. Would not propose the 7th. Just because of holidays, I think that would just take away additional staff time to prepare for the meeting. So then we have the 21st of January, which is the third Monday. We could have that be the rules of the Martin Luther King holiday, I believe, is the week before. No, it's not. So we were already looking at the 22nd of January for the third week meeting. So we could have rules on the 22nd and potentially the city manager discussion, although I don't know if you want to try to do both on the same evening. If not, we will likely need to find a non-Monday sometime in the month of January for one or the other. So
what I'd like to do is to move this along. I think there's going to be information gathering. So the question is, will the staff have adequate time? I think you won't. You don't think you will?
Not for the 7th.
I know, but for the 22nd?
I think we can shoot for the 22nd.
Yeah, we could have. This would be a good opportunity to hear more from the council about exactly what you want the structure to look like, but we will certainly come forth with proposals.
Right. So my
There are models from other communities.
Right. So my guess is that we look at what other communities' best practices, that we talk amongst ourselves about changes that we think need to be made. We hear obviously from the public, but that this is the beginning of the discussion. This is not going to be done in one night. Right. Okay. Is the 22nd for that okay with everybody?
All right, so we'll go ahead and do that on the 22nd, and I'll continue to work with Mayor Haggerty on the other matters.
Okay, all right. Okay, so that is actually brings us to old business, which is the lobbying ordinance, and Ms. Kelly has 10 minutes to make a presentation.
She's brutal.
Good evening. So I'm here tonight to talk about why I feel and why many residents feel that it's very important for Evanston to adopt a lobby ordinance, why it would lead to better. Oh, sure. Are those there? Thank you. Awesome. Thank you. A lobby ordinance would promote and enhance public confidence overall in our city government. It would create greater openness and trust in government decision-making by ensuring minimal secrecy. It would shed light on transparency on who is influencing government decisions, and it would advance the principles of good government. And I also attached an article that was recommended to me by the executive director of the Board of Ethics of Chicago, who worked very closely with me, and he's also very much in favor of seeing Evanston adopted a lobby ordinance and is prepared to work pro bono to help the city of Evanston draft and create an appropriate ordinance. Next slide. There's the clicker there. There you go. And Tom, you can feel free if I make any mistakes. I know you know this better than me. Let's see. Okay, so what is lobbying? Lobbying is essentially communicating in writing or orally speaking with the intent to influence decision of a government person, of a city staff or government person. It's a legal activity. It's an exercise of the First Amendment right to petition the government, but ultimately it is about communicating with government officials or government employees to influence their decisions. It's also about trying to influence it's primarily about influencing city officials on behalf of another individual or entity. And I want to say, let's see if I get this right. Lobbying is also does a lot of good in society too, and I want to make sure I point that out, that many sectors of our society, children, elderly, and others have been positively impacted by lobbying. So I just want to be real clear on what lobbying is. That encompasses, unfortunately, it's taken on sort of a vilified profile. So lobby ordinance in Evanston would reflect good government. It would, I think I just went backwards, sorry. Okay, so a lobbyist, the lobbyist doesn't have lobbyist on a calling card. A lobbyist could be like the director of economic development for an institution. Frequently they're lawyers, lobbyists. But a lobbyist is always determined by his or her activity, meaning meeting to try to influence government or staff, city government staff, to influence decisions. Again, as I said, lobbyists can make really valuable contributions to informed and effective government. A lobbyist lobbies on behalf of another person, and usually for some sort of compensation, but not always. So you don't always have to get paid to be a lobbyist. And I've attached some links here to like the City of Chicago, and I meant to include some others from other ones. There's thousands of lobby ordinances out there. And I think we don't need to read, if we consider this, and I certainly hope you will, given the state of affairs between the residents and the city right now, the city government, and the lack of trust, I really hope we'll consider moving this. But we do have the City of Chicago right next to us, and so that's a fabulous resource. And we have, like I said, their executive director is prepared pro bono to work with the City of Evanston to help Evanston set up the best possible lobby ordinance. Did I do that right? I didn't do that right. Sorry. Okay, so who is not a lobbyist or who is exempt from lobby ordinances? Just to clarify, people who represent themselves, homeowners, citizens, taxpayers, are exempt from registering as lobbyists. The press is exempt, so if a newspaper, the Round Table, writes an editorial in favor of something, that's not considered lobbying. People who testify at public comment are not considered lobbyists, but it is important that part of it usually will say, it's important that they identify themselves and disclose any material interest. If they're acting on behalf of someone else at public comment, they should disclose it. But because it's out in the open, that's why they are not considered lobbyists. The point of a lobby ordinance is secrecy, right? So that we minimize secrecy, so that the residents have a right to know how you all are being influenced, what meetings you're having with what lobbyists, et cetera, so that we have a better sense as to understand why you're making the decisions you are. How does a lobby ordinance work? People register annually, usually through a board of ethics. That's in the case of Chicago. Sometimes it's through a clerk's office, as in New York City. And frequently you also just have independent lobby commissions. Registered lobbyists then provide periodic disclosures, quarterly, every 6 months, whatever is determined by one's particular jurisdiction. And when they make those reports, they report on who they're lobbying for, like who their client is, if they've been paid to lobby, and if so, how much. Again, you don't always have to receive payment, though, to be a lobbyist. Which government officials or departments you've lobbied, and what matters you've lobbied on, and then a list of gifts, meals, et cetera, that you've paid for as part of your lobbying efforts, and the recipient of those, and the amount and the date, as well as your political contributions. So I took a screenshot from Chicago's web its data portal on lobbying, just to give you an idea. So, for example, it's really I wanted everybody to see the accessibility and how important this would be for residents. So I could, for example, say I wanted to know, I see Airbnb there's a lot of discussion about maybe changing zoning or something for Airbnbs, and I want to know if there's someone in town lobbying. I can put in their portal, I can put Airbnb, and then I'm given the name of the lobbyist. And with that, so it's real nice, so as a resident or someone who's concerned, you can do that without foraying to see if there's lobbying going on. And then I can take that name and put it into search lobbyists. I would enter that person's name that was next to the Airbnb, and then I get a whole list of that lobbyist's activities for Airbnb, for example. So very user-friendly. Yeah. And I just wanted to show also some of the point of a lobby ordinance is there's teeth in it. It is binding. So, for example, if you fail to register as a lobbyist, this is a recent case of a lobbyist for Uber that failed to register, that was found to be communicating, lobbying Rahm Emanuel on his personal email, and every day that he exceeded, I think it's 5 days after registering, for every day that he didn't register, he was fined $1,000. Not Uber, but the lobbyist. Uber did, I think, receive also a small fine, but not like the lobbyist. So it's to discourage running that stop sign. So that's a little bit more about that, just to show you how it can play out. It's also to say that this really doesn't cost the city anything in terms of the fees. You would set appropriate registration fees that would cover appropriate administrative costs, as well as then you also have fines. that help to offset any cost of creating, for example, a web, what do you call it? A web design, a portal, a data portal. Here's a couple of ordinances that I listed, and I listed Chicago because it's right next door. That's out of a Board of Ethics that has close to $1 million in budget of about $1 million. So they spend a lot of time studying this. They travel around the nation, comparing notes with other attorneys. So I think it's a fabulous resource. In speaking in depth with Steve Berlin, he did mention San Francisco. He thought that that was a little bit more comprehensive and robust. So I also looked at plenty of other ones, much smaller, in towns much smaller than Evanston. There are thousands of ordinances and hundreds for towns that are much smaller than Evanston. Again, this is about building trust. It's about shedding light on our understanding of why our elected representatives as well as city staff make the decisions they do. So again, it's about costs in terms of setting up a lobby ordinance. Mostly all the costs would be offset through fees. And again, you set fees so that they would appropriately pay for registration fees. They can't be too high. The idea is not to hit the lobbyists hard with really exorbitant fees. I think Illinois did that and got sued by the ACLU because they set them too high. So the idea is to make it accessible. So the fees, I think Chicago is $350 registration. And then there's fines, and then you also save a lot through lawsuits. There's a correlation with fewer lawsuits with cities that have lobby ordinances or provisions. It could be a provision as part of your ethics ordinance. And I said the first year might be a little bit higher when you set up the website, the portal. But otherwise, the cost is not an issue. Okay, so who enforces it and administers it? That varies from municipality to municipality. In Chicago, it is the Board of Ethics. It's a provision within the Board of Ethics, and I believe it's in a packet that I put together that you have. In other places, such as New York, it's the clerk's office. In other places, it's an independent lobby commission. And just thinking loosely and talking about it with Steve Berlin of Chicago, the executive director, maybe something for Evanston would be maybe an independent commission that would work in conjunction with our legal department.
Okay, Ms. Kelly, your 10 minutes is up.
Okay, I think I have 2 more slides. Sure. So we would just need to determine the most efficient and cost-effective means to administer the lobby ordinance. So there is, Steve asked me to share. He said, please share his contact information with all of you so that you could contact him to work with him to set up a lobby ordinance. Moving forward, I hope that we really can in Evanston create greater openness and trust with our Evanston city government and advance the principles of good government. I ask tonight that you please direct the legal department with assistants and experts such as the executive director, Steve Berlin, to draft a lobby ordinance or a lobby provision for consideration at a future city council meeting. I hope you will all seriously consider moving forward on this to restore trust in our city and trust in your decisions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mayor Haggerty?
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Kelly. I have a question. So,
sure.
I think in considering any new ordinance, we need to understand what problem we're solving. And so can you, give us examples of, problems that exist here, concrete examples that, this ordinance would have solved? You can't.
No. The point is it's about secrecy. It's about when people well, I can say that there have been many decisions taken here that have been very unpopular. And so people wonder. I will say, people wonder, why is City Council making this decision when so many people have poured out saying no? The Albion, great example, right, Don? Nobody wanted the Albion in town. We probably should have had a referendum, but we didn't get it together to have a referendum to show you that, in fact, the silent majority did not want the Albion either. But people wonder about things like that, right? They want to know. So they stop wondering if you have a lobby ordinance, and we say, oh, no, okay, so this was it. People would have an opportunity then it would help to soothe those tensions. I think when there's that would be probably the one scenario when you have a city council and city staff working what feels like, to many people, it feels like it's against the will of the city and the residents. Then in a case like that, it'd be very helpful to have a lobby ordinance where you could look up and see. Okay. So for example, I'm just giving you, All right,
so let's take this evening, for example. Mm-hmm. So, people got up earlier on a different item on the agenda dealing with the Ethics Committee and the complaint with Alderman Rainey. Under this scenario here that you presented, would people have to get up if they had an interest, meaning like, hey, I gave money to the Save Harley Clark group.
Right. No, individual residents
even
do.
though they're part of a group.
Right. Correct. Now there are, and you guys might like this one. Some cities do in fact have grassroots lobby laws. Mm-hmm. Some cities do have that, where the grassroots organization registers. Chicago doesn't. Most do not, because of what it entails. It's, because of the nature of grassroots. I won't, give you a lecture now about what grassroots means, but some actually do have that, if that's the kind of thing you're referring to.
Okay. So, all right, let's use another example of the potential development on the library parking lot. Okay, so you have developers there. Mm-hmm. You have two important structures next to it, the Women's Club and the Francis Willard House. Would all of them have to register? Because I can tell you, regarding that particular project, I've met with them all, because they call me up and pretty much
I'm sure you guys
I meet with a lot of people, right, as the mayor, and people have different perspectives up here. Mine is, as an elected official, one of my responsibilities is to meet and to listen, and so I just want to try to understand this in practice, just using that example.
Sure. So, so you said
I use the Women's Club, the office building. This is the office building on the library parking lot that's being considered.
Right. Okay. So with that, so if there were paid lobbyists, or
are you a paid lobbyist if you're the developer yourself?
If you're
obviously you have a financial interest if it goes through.
That's exactly right. So in that case, like I say, it depends on what the activity is. So if he is meeting, representing all the shareholders, whatever, representing other people, but going to push for, this would be kind of like a, it's close to there's also procurement lobbying. Again, Tom, you know more about this probably. Feel free to jump in and help me out. But so yes, so someone like that would also have to register as a lobbyist, because they are trying to move an agenda forward that's going to be voted for on behalf of others, not just a single. So if you're a single resident, you don't.
But what about the two entities next door in that instance? The Women's Club.
Tell me what, give me the scenario. I don't understand.
So there's going to be development next door. They want to come and lobby you. Either maybe they say, hey, there's big problems and I don't think you should vote for this or approve this, or hey, I want to know maybe what can I get from the developer if I go along and say, okay, I'm going to be all right with this development.
So you mean so from the Women's Club, say someone working at the Women's Club?
Somebody on the leadership team, somebody on their executive committee comes to you.
If they were going up to you, and let me go back to this. I think that in that case, they are not per se trying to, I don't know about the Women's Club. Okay. I can't say. I know that individuals and residents and taxpayers and citizens representing themselves, no, but maybe if they are representing the Women's Club, others besides themselves, then yes. Is that correct, Tom? Do you know? Like if they're most of the time it's if they're being compensated. So in this case, they probably aren't being. If they're being compensated, then yes.
Good. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, feel free to jump in.
I think one of the issues that you had previously, though, is with somebody who was being compensated, encouraging people who were not being compensated to make public comment on a development. And that wouldn't be covered.
Right, you're right.
That wouldn't be covered.
Absolutely. But it would be encouraged to disclose. Just like when you pointed out when we had somebody come up, like if you got any money, you're encouraged to disclose, not as part of, you wouldn't have to register, though.
But I think any ordinance that you or Mr. Berlin or whoever would draft wouldn't cover the circumstance. You're not going to cover every circumstance that you're talking about.
Correct.
And we don't have kind of like routine and repeating interests that appear before us the way that you would have in Springfield, where Commonwealth Edison has a team of lobbyists. We don't have that type of thing. You know what I mean?
So I think people feel like we do because of the amount of development that's been happening. And also I have to address, I'd be remiss not to address the most obvious, Northwestern. And I just want to say really quickly, I go way back. My great-great-grandfather, Elhanan Sertle, was in the first graduating class of 5. My son's a senior there. I did graduate work there. But just simply because Northwestern is in this town, that alone, that enormous institution, only because of Northwestern, we should have a lobby ordinance, if only because of Northwestern, not to mention all the developments that have been going up. We should know when people are meeting on behalf of Northwestern's economic development or whatever else in the interest of Northwestern, we as residents should know that. We should have access to know how Northwestern is influencing our council. And again, I embrace Northwestern. I have deep roots with Northwestern, but just for Northwestern alone, we should have a lobby ordinance.
All right, in that scenario, you would have any employee of Northwestern?
Anybody that's trying to meet with an official, again, the definition, I think you know what it is, it's communicating in any form, writing or speaking, to influence a decision in city council for others. And that would mean if you're employed by Northwestern, but you're moving it for Northwestern, whoever the others, all the people are Northwesterners, absolutely, you would register. And that would be a huge benefit to our town.
I'm just trying to think of like a workable registration framework. I don't think you're going to get enough fees to cover the cost. City of Chicago, it's a $350 fee that is worth paying. Here, I don't think people with one-off issues would necessarily pay it. I'm trying to think of just things that we've had in the last year.
When I worked through the numbers with Steve, it seemed that it wouldn't be an issue. And in terms of, because the main expense initially, all you're talking about is the portal, building the portal.
Right. But the registration and reporting burden is on...
It's on the lobbyist.
Right.
Right.
Who could just decide...
Right, they can run a stoplight just like any other law.
Right, but then what I'm saying is, like, and I think your example of, where it would need to have teeth, there aren't really any teeth if you're not coming back.
If we have fines, there's teeth.
Right.
Just like Chicago, just like the example I showed you.
I mean, like you had mentioned that there would be diminished exposure to lawsuits. Can you think of a lawsuit that you've had?
Well, what I can say is I studied cities. We did a study that municipalities who have lobby ordinances across the board have fewer lawsuits.
But I don't think we've.
I know. I do.
I mean, I'm saying in Evanston, like we haven't had a lawsuit.
I know we spend a lot in lawsuits, Tom.
Yeah, no, that's
we
true.
spend a lot in lawsuits. Anything that we can do right now to diminish what we're paying out in lawsuits, we should be doing it. Also, but most importantly, to diminish the sense of distrust towards our city government, and this would be a huge step.
I don't think we've had lawsuits relating to this. That's,
right,
what I'm saying.
I don't know.
And I don't know. I just, to the mayor's point, I mean, like if you could like say what the problem you're trying to solve is, we could work backwards from there.
Again, I think Northwestern and developers, that's enough.
Of us.
Northwestern and developers, when we have things, like I said, when we have developments going on, when we have Northwestern, everybody knows Northwestern lobbies. Give me a break. Are some of you going to tell me Northwestern never lobbies the city council or city government? Are you going to say that? Can any of you honestly tell me right now that Northwestern has never had anybody come to you and meet with you to lobby on their behalf? Right? Right? All right.
We do have the NU City Committee that was put in place.
But this is for the residents, though. I mean, I think you don't understand.
And that's what the NU City Committee is for, to give the residents of that area in the T1, T2, U1, R1 zoning district a way to understand and hear from Northwestern directly about any advanced planning that they have that will impact the residential neighborhood that surrounds the university.
Right.
We meet quarterly. That's all we talk about.
Yeah, I know you have a board of ethics too, Judy. So anyway, I think this is very concrete. And again, towns much smaller than this have it, and it's not costing them. They're meeting. Again, you set your fees to appropriately pay for appropriate administrative fees. And you work from there. And what you do is you create you're going to create more trust, you're going to create more transparency, you're going to shed light on what is influencing all of you as well as our city staff. And there's absolutely no reason we shouldn't do this. Again, towns much smaller do this, and it's not bankrupting them, it's not putting them in the red.
Okay, Alderman Braithwaite.
I just wanted to say thank you very much for the presentation
You're
and
welcome.
the thought that went into it. And I'm also looking at the time, so can I make a motion that we file this?
Sure.
What does file mean by the mean? That doesn't mean ignore? Or
it's part of the record.
It's an acknowledgement that you've submitted a report, and we're going to receive
what?
it.
And you're going to what when you file it? What do you do with it when you file it, like tonight? What does that mean to file
the exact same thing that we've done with the other. So we keep it.
No, I just don't understand. Does it mean it comes up again or what? I just don't quite understand.
Yeah.
It just means.
Yeah. there's still a whole agenda. So
Right, I just want to understand, because I didn't understand what file meant.
It just means we keep it in a file. I mean, there is no file, actually.
And can a resident bring it up? Can we say, I want to pull that file up?
Yes, like you bring up anything else. So if you have someone on the dais who, particularly the chair of a committee, will make the motion and bring it up for you as a resident, can't just come forward at public comment and say, I'd like to bring up X, Y, and Z, but someone, as Alderman Nguyen did, who put you on the agenda here, can do that at another time.
So if a resident would like to have the lobby ordinance proposal brought up, they can
work with their elected official and see if they will bring that back to the council.
But otherwise, it's done here. Is that what I'm understanding from everybody?
Otherwise, it's done for the night because we have another committee meeting that started an hour ago.
Right.
Okay.
So we have a room full of people out there who would like to speak.
Thank you.
Okay, that's the end of our business for the evening. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.
Can you give a time for?
Yeah, Human Services was to start at 7:30 tonight. I thank you for keeping your comments short. And we will begin in, how about 10 minutes? At 8:45.